And exactly that, what you see on the screen now on my brand new Firestick Lite, is one of the main reasons why I would actually recommend this device over the 4K Firestick. Now, no clickbait here, no long stories. It's simply the fact that for most of you who like to use the Firestick for streaming, one of the biggest issues you have is to do with storage. As we know, a typical 4K Firestick, you only have a couple of gigs of free space. So once you do install a couple of applications, once those applications start building up some cache, some of those files, that space gets quickly taken up. Now, of course, you can follow some of my previous videos and use an ADB process to extend the storage of your 4K Firestick. Now, the big issue with that is that process requires you to download remote ADB shell, run a couple of ADB commands. Once that's done, you also have to type in some other commands if you want to move applications from internal storage onto USB or back. So all of that procedure, all of that process is not really ideal for the standard user. Whereas with this brand new Firestick Lite, because it is running that Android version 9, that ability to expand your storage is actually built in to the operating system. So if I click on OK, and here we have it, guys. So within a couple of seconds, I've just plugged in a USB drive, clicked on storage, and I now have 60 gigs of free space on my Amazon Firestick Lite. And that is one of the 3 main reasons why I would recommend this device over the 4K Firestick for your typical streaming users. Now, of course, if you're somebody that has to have everything in 4K, the only kind of content you watch is in 4K, then clearly this device is not suitable. But for most of you who stream all of your content from third-party applications or maybe the K application, you can now enjoy all of that content in full 1080p without any worry that your device is going to run out of space. So before we get on to the other reasons and some of the benchmarks, do take a moment to hit that like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So with all of that being said, let's get started. If you're new to the channel and you want to stay up to date with the latest tech tutorials, the latest Firestick, Android and Android TV tips and tricks, then please do subscribe and hit the notification bell. It's a small click from you, but it makes a big difference to me. Thank you. And here it is, guys. So this actually arrived today, the new Firestick Lite. Remote control, we already know it's lacking those volume rocker buttons or buttons you can use to control your infrared devices, but we do get this new guide button. I can actually use that now. So let's press that, and that should take me to some kind of, yeah, it takes you to the guide app. Let's back out of that. But the key thing, guys, the real beauty with this new Firestick is the fact that it's running Android 9, which is Fire OS version 7. And what that means is I can buy a cheap OTG cable for a couple of pounds. I can then stick in any kind of USB drive I like. And in my example, I used a SanDisk USB 3 64 gig drive. As soon as I plug that drive in, the Firestick actually prompts me saying that it's detected a new drive and do you want to format it? So no need to type in any ADB commands or do any of that manual stuff. All of that functionality is actually built into the UI. So I just go to settings, my Fire TV, and we have a brand new section for that USB drive. So I can click on that. I can then eject the drive, I can format it, or also manage the applications on there. So they really have made it very, very easy on this Firestick Lite. So let's now test some benchmarks and performance with this new device. So before we look at the actual benchmarks and numbers, in terms of actually real world usage, i.e. just navigating around, clicking on things, I would say it's more or less identical to the 4K Firestick. Now, the obvious reason for that is this is running the MediaTek 8695 processor, the D variant, and whereas the 4K Firestick just runs the MediaTek 8695. The D variant just basically means that this device is limited to that 1080p output, whereas with the 4K Firestick, as the name implies, you can actually push 4K resolution. But real world usage, guys, it seems more or less on par with the 4K Firestick. If I just go to About, and there we can see it's running Fire OS version 7.2.2.3, and the storage, once again, we can see we have the internal storage and the newly created external storage. Okay, let's back out of that. Let's do a test of the wireless. So I typically get around about 320, 330 meg when testing over Ethernet on my PC. Let's now test that over wireless for the Firestick Lite. Okay, so we can comfortably get over 200 meg downstream on this new Firestick Lite. I will just test once or maybe twice more just to see that it is, consistent. So that's 224 meg down and 31 meg up, and we can see that's more than enough for 4K, even 8K, even though this device is limited to 1080p. And let's test again. So give or take around about 200 meg, or this one's actually 254 meg, but you have to appreciate that I'm in a household, so other people are using the internet, so there may be slight variations in those results, but comfortably we can say I can easily get 200, 220 meg on this new Firestick Lite. Now the key thing is what happens when we enable the VPN. Let's back out of this. Let's now turn on the VPN. Okay, my VPN is now connected. Let's back out of this. Let's go back to the speed test. Now as long as you can get around about 20-25 meg, that's more than enough for HD streaming. So let's see what we get. Okay, so we're getting close to 60 meg in the VPN test. And as you can just see with those tick boxes there, that's more than enough for even UHD streaming or 4K streaming. Let me just do that test one more time just to make sure it is consistent. And here is the next test with the VPN activated. And again, we're comfortably getting close to 50 meg downstream. Let's back out of that. Now if we bring up the developer tools menu, as you know, this device only has 1 GB of RAM. Now that 1 GB of RAM, it is DDR4, so it is much faster than the previous generation Firestick 2, but let's just have a look at the free RAM. And there we have it, guys. So right now my device is running with around about 200 megs of free memory, which as you know is not a lot at all. So I will be looking into making a debloat tool especially for this device, and also looking at ways we can customize the launcher and remove some of this bloat. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you are subscribed. Okay, so around about 200 megs of free memory on a brand new, newly provisioned Firestick Lite. Let's back out of that. Let's try some applications. So this is this application, browsing my NAS, where I have all of the movies that I've previously purchased. Let's find something a bit on the large side. Here, for example, we can see this file here is almost 5 GB in size. It is just a 1080p file, but it's a very high bitrate. So let's see how this Firestick Lite performs in streaming this kind of content over wireless on my home network. So let's click on that. Okay, that starts up pretty much straight away. Let's try forwarding that a bit. That's working absolutely fine. I mean, forwarding in 10-minute chunks just takes a second for it to catch up. I'm not really seeing any drop frames. Let's just forward that quite a bit. This is actually a great movie, by the way. Let's forward it to about here. That looks really good, really smooth. And we can see this device is having no issue streaming almost a 5 GB file over the wireless network in my house. Okay, let's stop that. Okay, so I would say streaming should be no issues on this device. I mean, one of the things you have to appreciate that because the device only has 1 GB RAM, you can imagine that if you are running lots of things at the same time, then the device will probably start struggling. But what I've seen so far with just basic application testing, it seems to be performing fine. Now looking at the exact specification, fortunately we can see on the AFTV News website, Elias has actually compiled all of the specs for all of the devices, including the new second generation Fire TV Cube. So it really makes it a lot easier for me to explain exactly what the differences are between these devices. Now what we're mostly concerned about is the Firestick Lite and how that compares with the 4K Firestick. So we can see probably the biggest thing straight away is just the fact that we have a $30 device versus a $50 device. Now what does that extra $20 give you? The first thing we can see is we do get that 4K 60 FPS support, whereas on the Firestick Lite that I've purchased, we are limited to 1080p. We can also see that the 4K Firestick does actually support Dolby Vision, which again is missing from the Firestick Lite. Let's scroll down. Now in terms of audio decoding, you are just limited to standard stereo and PCM, whereas with the 4K Firestick and even with the Firestick 3, you do actually get Dolby Digital, Dolby Digital Plus, and also Dolby Atmos. So if you really are a sound purist, then this is really something to take into consideration, as the Firestick Lite only supports these basic standards. Let's scroll down. And here's the key thing, guys, regarding the performance. So we can see all of them have this MediaTek 8695 processor, but on the Firestick Lite and the Firestick 3, it's the D variant, which means you are limited to 1080p. Here we can just see once again they all have a 4-core processor, which is 4 cores running at 1.7 GHz. And of course the Beast, which is the second generation Fire TV Cube, has that much faster processor. Now one interesting thing I can mention here is they all have the same GPU, the Firestick Lite, the Firestick 3 and the 4K Firestick, but because these two devices are limited to 1080p, it actually means these devices do slightly better in GPU tests because they're only pushing out at 1080p, whereas the 4K Firestick, because of that 4K resolution, it does have to do more work. Here we can just see that these devices only have 1 gig RAM, whereas the 4K Firestick has that 1.5 gigs. The wireless is all the same, Bluetooth is all the same, the internal storage is the same for the 3 Firesticks, but scrolling down, and this is the key, guys, we have native support of external storage. So native means it's built in, it doesn't require any workarounds, it doesn't require any kind of manual commands or anything like that. We can easily expand that storage, and that really is once again one of the killer features of these new Firesticks. Let's scroll down. Oh, here we can just see for the remote control, the Firestick Lite misses out on these buttons here, so no power button, no volume, and no mute. Although we do get that live channel guide, so if that is something that you're interested in, we can see that the Firestick Lite does have that feature. But the reason why we have the built-in support is because these devices now are running Fire OS 7, which is based on Android 9, whereas our tried and tested 4K Firestick is still running Android 7.1, so no native external storage. Okay, let's now look at the actual benchmarks. So firstly, in the Geekbench, we have the single core and the multi-core, and once again, guys, many thanks to Elias for compiling these benchmarks. We can see that my device, which is the Firestick Lite, gets a single core score of 706 and a multi-core score of 2125. And we can see, guys, it's pretty much identical or very close to the 4K Firestick. Whereas of course, if you compare that to the second generation Fire TV Cube, we can see there's a massive difference. So it just goes back to the fact that these sticks are running more or less the same CPU. Now going over to the GPU benchmarks, we can see here the Firestick Lite gets a 3D Mark score of 5803, but we can see that's actually slightly more than the 4K Firestick, and Elias thinks one of the reasons for that is the fact that we're running at low resolution on these newer sticks, which means that the device doesn't have to work as hard as the 4K Firestick, which is pushing out that 4K resolution. So in the 3D Mark test, the new Firesticks actually beat the 4K Firestick. So wrapping this up, the first reason why I recommend this device may actually be more suitable for your typical streamer is of course the fact that you can use external storage natively. The next reason is the fact that this device is running Android version 9, so in terms of just future proofing, or if there are newer applications that only work on the newer operating system, at least with this device you are covered more than the 4K Firestick, which is still only running Android version 7.1. And lastly, just the fact that at that price point for $30, I now have a device that gives me Full HD Netflix, gives me Full HD Prime Video, Full HD YouTube. I can now enjoy all of my streaming applications. I have no issues with space because I can easily expand that storage. Also the fact that the device comes from Amazon, so you know you're guaranteed to get software updates, support, so you have all of that backing from that company. So all of those great features plus those guaranteed software updates for $30, I really do think that makes it a very compelling device. But that's just my opinion, guys. I would love to hear what you guys think. Do you think this device is a good option for streamers? Do let me know what you think, and I'll hopefully catch up with you guys real soon. Thanks.